Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Pardon me, there was a disrupted video. And so I wanted to continue the tendency of thought that was there so that I can close out with this idea. So part of what we're struggling with, and there's more of a background to what I'm saying on part one of this video, which is it's uploaded already to Facebook. What I wanted to say is that the Kalam school of thought has a lot of work to accomplish before it can begin to address contemporary issues, right? It's a tall claim to think that only if we study logic, just put it that way, that's going to be a safeguard against atheism and against turning away from the religion. Do we agree on the point when Dr. Hamza Bakri brings up the issue of modalities of reasoning that is helpful when it comes to the religion to safeguard against atheism? In some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. We have to be open to the fact that we have different psychological orientations. There was a reason why Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he opposed the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila laid down much of the framework for ilm al-kalam, which later Imam al-Ash'ari comes and he reorients certain issues that come up in ilm al-kalam. But at the end of the day, the idea of having some sort of rationalist tendency wins out. And we have many stories where this idea of needing a detailed rational explanation to everything that's religious, where you have some people that they reach a state of certainty by their relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, where that point is declared. Like even Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, for as much as they call him to be an Imam al-Kalam, if you really take Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, and you look and you survey his thought, you're going to see different tendencies. You're going to see different tendencies in his thinking. You're going to see a tendency where he is a jurist. You're going to see a tendency where he's talking about being a good practitioner of the deen. And you're going to see a tendency in which he is rationally explaining and articulating certain ideas of the deen and refuting other concepts that may be problematic. You see a range of orientations. Imam al-Ghazali has a range of orientations. Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi doesn't have one orientation. You understand what I'm saying? And so part of the dilemma that we have as a Sunni community is that we want to fix all of our problems with a screwdriver, so to speak. We don't realize that we're at a point where civilizationally we need to have multiple orientations for how we're going to address the dilemma that humanity is in at the moment. So the Kalamists, the way that they're coming to this at a time period when the geopolitical situation has caused the decline of oil money going behind the Salafi da'wah, and a political transformation has taken place in Saudi, which was a big promoter of the Salafi da'wah within the color of the school of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. The Salafi da'wah is not only limited to Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, because there's different intellectual architects that don't have anything to do with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, like Jamaluddin al-Qasimi, like Shawkani, like Imam ibn Wazir, like Sadiq Hassan Khan. There's a number of people. Even if you were to go to people like al-Bayhaqi and so on and so forth, you're not going to tell me that people like al-Bayhaqi and Ibn Hajar and al-Nawawi are 100% in line or aligned with the Kalam orientation, right? That's just to be dishonest. And there's some within the context of the U.S., that they get into the politics between the so-called traditional orientation and as being the Sunnah and the Salafi orientation as being bid'ah, and they want to make it seem like there is no presence of an Athari approach. You understand? That like Imam Ibn Salah himself was against philosophy. Imam Suyuti, had some sort of an orientation which showed as a muhaddith his critique, and he even was one that put forward an abridged version of the refutation of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's refutation of the logicians. That's not to say that I'm against ilm al-kalam or I'm against logic or against... This is not the point to be against this group or that group. That's not the purpose of this live. The purpose of this live is to say that we continue what Imam al-Ghazali himself has said and Imam Ibn Rushd has said. We continue these perennial debates amongst different orientations of thinking. And you can never build a civilization on that. You can never build a civilization by continual intellectual strife within your own community. A university itself, as a concept, is able to integrate different tendencies of thinking and call them disciplines. Whether it's the sociological orientation or the political orientation or the orientation of the humanities in terms of literature or philosophy itself or at times theology, all of those disciplines are able to exist as areas of knowledge which come under the leadership of the institution that's called the university. And somehow or some way, that curriculum that is put forward by that institution is able to integrate those tendencies to the point where the student will have to become a person that is well-rounded in those disciplines, not necessarily an expert, but when the student studies each discipline, each teacher will act like their knowledge base, it is it. And Imam Ghazali talked about that as being a problem. And so our approach in real scholarship has always been traditional. That's why we say Sahib al-Funun, yani aqwa bi kathir min Sahib al-Fan. The idea of being interdisciplinary is going to be more strong than a person just being grounded in one area. And our idea, if you look at, for instance, Hafiz bin Hajar was known as a faqih. He was known as a person that knew the Arabic language, and a person that knew tafsir, a person that knew hadith. But then he became known to be a muhaddith. But that was after the fact that he was well-rounded. Modernity downplays the necessity to be well-rounded and highlights this idea of expertise. And that was the problem in Islamic civilization, which was raised by Imam al-Ghazali himself. So the kalam is, in today's time, to say that we're going to save the deen by reintroducing the logic of the past, that's a farce. That is, a claim that just can't be upheld. And I was talking about how some religious traditions, and I mentioned the Catholics themselves, they kept some sort of rational, logical tendency, and it still didn't save them from the fact of their faith collapsing and them going into questions and doubt. And they provided rational explanations. There was other challenges that came to play as to how it is that rationality and the scientific methodology was going to operate. And this type of questioning was coming up in Turkey. You see it in Mustafa Sabri. You see it in the writings of Said Nursi, which is more closer to our time. So the Ghazali problem and the Ibn Taymiyyah problem and what was going on with those schools of thought at that time are not necessarily going to cover ground for us 100%, in terms of helping us to deal directly with the problems that we face in today's time. We have a whole new set of challenges, some of which overlap with problems of the past and some of which are unprecedented. Logic by itself is not enough to be able to allow us to build a Muslim mind. That's something which is extremely important to understand. As far as being able to engage intellectually, the point that he makes that, mashayikh or scholars or imams not engaging the community intellectually, how that can lead to atheism or it can lead to problems in people's deen, we agree on that. The question now is, where it becomes a point of challenge is how do we develop modes of thinking some that are directly grounded in the Quran and the Sunnah, and others which may be indirectly grounded in the Quran and the Sunnah, to help our people navigate intellectually. And that's an academic problem. It's a tarbiyah problem. It's an educational problem in a practical sense. You understand what I mean? But at the end of the day, there's a point to be said for that. But there's also a point for simplicity in religion. If some people don't want to engage rational discourses, it's fine. Let them be. But we should be able to provide, and let me pause for a moment before going further. This is exactly what Imam Ghazali was getting at. You know what I'm saying? This is exactly the concept of the alchemy of happiness. That moving away from these types of things. Sometimes reason shuts down. Reason is not enough. And so the Kalamists, that's the problem that they bring to the table. The problem that they bring to the table is that they think that if you just follow our methodology, you'll be safeguarded. Well, what happens to a person that exemplifies logic and reasoning and ilm al-kalam like al-Ghazali when they turn away from that reality totally and they go into a crisis mode? So then what happened to reasoning? How was it that it's safeguarded against doubt and so on and so forth? You understand what I'm saying? And so we have to realize we can't skin a cat just one way. You understand what I'm saying? We can't get to Mecca just by one route. We have to be more savvy than that. And so this is a serious problem that's coming from people that are intellectually grounding stuff. Look, the Muslim world has not saved itself from atheism and doubt in the deen. Just because there were people there. There's many people in the Muslim world that have mastered ilm al-kalam. Whether in Egypt or in Syria or in Turkey or other places. There's many people that have mastered that. And yet they were not able to safeguard the community from the problems that come up with atheism or agnosticism or having doubts in the deen. And it's the same thing. You have plenty of people in places like Saudi that had mastered Aqidah, and it wasn't able to safeguard Saudi from the problems that emerged later on. But we have to be much more wise than thinking that one way or another way is going to solve this civilizational crisis that is that the world is suffering, so to speak. And here you have to admit that those who do religious studies, even from amongst the non-Muslims, they have put their finger on this point. This crisis is not only with the Muslims. You see it with the Buddhists. You see it with the Christians. You see it with the Jewish community. There's things that have changed in the modern world which have created problems for people as to how they understand themselves as human beings and how they understand the world. And that's not always going to be solved rationally, because everybody's not going to go through some intellectual curriculum with you to get to religiosity. You understand what I'm saying? And so only a certain percentage of people are going to go that route. But one thing for sure is that if we had a culture that we produce, if we had literature, if we had the arts to support us, I guarantee you a lot of the problems that we have wouldn't be the same. Because part of the issue that we have in today's time comes back to deficiency in the arts. It comes back to civilizational deficiency. It comes back to not really mastering science from a perspective or a mode of Tawheed itself. We have a civilizational crisis. This is not going to be solved solely with just a few, methodological twists back so that we get into a traditional curriculum and then we're safeguarded. That's not how this works. You know what I'm saying? So I think, the idea that atheism is solved just by rationality is not true. You have too many people that are not grounded in the deen. You have too many people that are not grounded in the deen. You have too many people that don't have a foundational knowledge. You have too many people that on a Quranic level, the Quranic orientation doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the foundational point. Everything after that is a support. But many of us are so distant from the methodologies that are found in the Quran with regard to reasoning that, we think that we're going to be safeguarded, that Iman is going to be obtained with just mastering a certain mode of reasoning. And that's it. And that just doesn't work like that. You understand what I'm saying? There's a reason why we have a holy book, and I'm not saying that we douse or that we negate the possible usefulness of some of these sciences. But I am saying to claim that by itself is going to safeguard us, it's just not true at all. time itself and experience itself and life itself has shown that that's not the reality. The Muslim world has fallen behind, on many things, that pertain to life as human beings, whether it's psychology or whether it's science, or whether it's understanding the application of law, or whether it's the arts, and so on and so forth. And so the crisis that we have, in many ways, unfortunately, is one of relevancy. And as long as we, are not interested in the importance of relevancy, which will take us back to foundational knowledge, it will take us back to ijtihad, it will take us back to investing in learning and building learning communities and everything that comes along with that. As long as we keep thinking that this thing is piecemeal, and it doesn't have to do with community building. It doesn't have to do with investment in knowledge. It doesn't have to do with that community being educated and that community being a living community of practice. As long as we think that if we just have a dars here and, we just study in this way and that's it, as long as we think that that's the solution, whether it's the Salafi da'wah or whether it's the Kalamist, we're never going to go anywhere. You understand what I'm saying? We're never going to go anywhere. And because that's still putting the burden of responsibility just on the individual, and the crisis that we have, it not only affects the individual, but it's affecting all of us. It's affecting all of us. And at the end of the day, we can have one argument or two arguments, or one method or another method. But what happens when you go into the classroom and all of those outside of the Muslim community, whether you go into the university classroom or the elementary school classroom or the middle school or high school classroom, what happens when the research that's produced that you're going to look online and you're going to search whatever area of knowledge is it? What happens when the Muslims don't have any representation in areas of knowledge? You're still going to run into the same issue. And this is my beef with all of those who keep, thinking that the sexuality problem or the sexual orientation problem is only solved by talking about the haram nature of certain types of sex. Well, what do you have in terms of scientific data to reflect your position? What textbooks do you have to educate a whole generation of people? They're slowly being put together, but still, you know what I'm saying? What's your understanding of biology? What's your understanding of psychology? Where's your diagnostic, man? That's what we're faced with. You know what I'm saying? On top of the legal, structure, which is supporting the permissibility of certain behaviors. So that's really a civilizational crisis. You understand what I'm saying? So the only thing that we have to fall back on is, like Imam al-Juwayni said, a community of belief and practice. In Rios al-Ummam, Imam al-Juwayni talked about, in the absence of real high-level organization, what would the Muslim Ummah do? To organize yourself as a community. So if we're going to organize ourselves as a community, then what is it that a community needs? And then we need to think how a community to be self-sustaining, what are the different areas of life that has to be engaged in, economically, intellectually, spiritually. It takes a lot of different things to build the community. So no, just by saying that logic by itself, the prohibition of logic leads to atheism, that just contradicts the position of many scholars, whether it's Ibn al-Jawzi, or Ibn Salah or others. Is there a way to navigate? And many people navigate in the world and they don't have to use logic. Now, reasoning, certain forms of reasoning, there's more than just reasoning in the logical sense, in the syllogism or the Aristotelian logic. There's other forms of reasoning. You understand? And that's where we have to be open to understand that. There's other forms of reasoning. And so now in this time period of geopolitical transformation, I have to say that some of you and many of you will get pissed off at me at this, but many of you, as traditionalists or Sufis, now you're coming out hard. Where were you at yesterday when the oil money was boosting hard? Now now you want to take and make sure that the Salafis are crushed so that you can come to the fore. That's not going to help us. Internal intellectual civil war on a consistent basis is not going to help us. What I would like to see? I would like to see scholars come to the fore and be able to highlight the strengths of other groups and then just say, I differ with that approach because of XYZ reason. But they have these strengths. Until we get to that point of being able to say, I differ and I really disagree with them strongly, You know what I'm saying? But they have these strengths. We're not going to get anywhere as an ummah, because at the end of the day, difference is built into the nature of reality. And we're going to differ. Everyone doesn't have to be oriented in the same way. But what is the bottom line that we as Muslims have to have in place in order for us to be considered a Muslim, and in order for us to practice? Everything outside of that becomes issues of differences. It may be a difference which is extremely problematic, or it may just be a difference, of sort, so to speak, in which diversity can exist. But we have to be able to get to a point where we just allow people to exist at the bottom line. We just consider ourselves okay. And we keep, coming to this point of wanting to dominate each other. And trust me, that itself is what's leading many people to turn away from religion, organized religion, the bickering and the confusion and just the complexity of issues and the inner fighting. That's really what's doing that. You understand what I'm saying? And because in the meantime, while we're doing that, while we're fighting each other, we're not investing energy to build a civilization which is relatable, relevant, reliable, speaking to the needs of the people. Other people are. So we're just attacking each other while other people are taking the platforms of servicing human needs, or creating the idea that they're servicing human needs. Right. And unfortunately, we live in a time period where no one wants to struggle for the deen. So people are going to go with what's most easiest at hand. And if that means relying on other people to do the thinking for them, they will do that. And if those who are doing the other thinking have institutions, are well organized, are, have the ability to market themselves right, unfortunately, the Muslims don't have that orientation. It's going to be other people, and that's what we're seeing. So we shouldn't have that in mind. Is Dr. Hamza Bakri onto something, that not answering the questions of the people or working with them intellectually is creating a problem? Yes. But to think that ilm al-kalam by itself is going to solve that, that's just not true. We had the approach of ilm al-kalam for decades. And that's one of the reasons why people started returning back to a more textual-based orientation in Aqidah. Because those intellectual arguments that were being put forward didn't have any relevance to the people spiritually or to life. Or it was just at another level which people couldn't see the value in it. The community lost being able to speak to people through that means. And then on top of that, we don't find that many of the calamists you were speaking to problems of the contemporary age. They stay stuck in debates in the past, just like most of our Aqidah wars are stuck on issues that pertain to the past, and contemporary realities are unaddressed. So what do we think we're accomplishing by that type of reasoning? And I end on that note. I took way more longer than what I wanted to say, but I think that we're constantly repeating the same cycle and circle, and we're stuck, and we end up just attacking each other, because we're not producing intellectually to speak to the minorities. I would like to see that the Muslims stop abusing each other and start addressing. If you want to talk about atheism, then get away from debating other Muslims. Start getting into the issue and take on the atheist himself. Take on the atheists themselves. Leave the Muslims alone. The Muslims are trying to figure out how to navigate this. If you as a calamist want to address the situation, then you take on the atheists. And I haven't seen many of these calamists take on Western thinkers that are the promoters of kufr themselves. They don't want to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? Somehow, somewhere they find some excuse for them, or they're enamored with the rationality that comes from them. You know what I'm saying? But they don't want to deconstruct those positions. Yeah. So when I look at that, I'm asking myself, is that the manifestation or sign of a defeated intellect, or what? That you turn on your own, but then when it comes to the source of the problem itself intellectually, you let it be. You let it go unaddressed. So if we're going to battle out ideas, let's battle those ideas which are extremely problematic. You understand what I'm saying? And causing harm in the world. Not another person that's struggling and trying to make, we can disagree with their methodology. But at the end of the day, that's still a believer. And so if that person is believing, leave their belief intact. We don't have to destroy the iman of a group or people or individual because we disagree with their methodology. You understand what I'm saying? And I don't know. Assalamu alaikum.